Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Closers Podcast. I'm your host, not as always. I can't say that anymore because I wasn't the host last time. My co-host took over the reins for an episode, did a remarkable job. His name is Quinn the Moondog Kalani. You know him very well at this point. How are you doing, man?
I'm pretty solid, brother. How are you doing?
I'm chilling, dude. Just trying to make the most of this time, this quarantine, trying to, stay the course on the podcast and stuff. Trying out some different things, and we have, I think, a pretty different episode in store for the people today. It's not your classic variety pod. We definitely have a topic, but we'll have our little variety segments in there too. But before we jump into that, I just want to quickly say, please follow us on Instagram at the Closers Podcast, on Facebook at Closers Podcast. That's our page, and we also have a YouTube channel. Please subscribe. It helps out the whole show a lot. And also, if you look in the link of our Instagram, in the bio of our Instagram, you see a link to everything there. So if you don't want to go to multiple sites, don't worry. We have a link tree in the bio of Instagram. So go there, check it out. If you haven't checked out Quinn's episode that he did on, I believe it came out on Tuesday, he talks about the fight nights, UFC fight nights, the Los Angeles Rams logo and uniforms, which very, very interesting analysis from a fan of the Rams. There's not many of those. So, and then he also talks about the importance of goals during this pandemic. So I urge you to definitely check those out, as well as our previous episodes. Everything's available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Pods, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Okay, so with that all out of the way, now we can jump into the meat and potatoes of this. Me and Quinn were trying to come up with a topic for this episode a week ago, and I tossed out the idea. I've been thinking about people of the decade because the Michael Jordan documentary came out and has been ongoing for the past 5 weeks. Finally, it's over, and it got me thinking, man, there's a strong argument to be made that Michael Jordan ruled the 90s. When you think of the 1990s, you think of Michael Jordan. Well, what about the other decades? Is Michael Jordan that person for everybody? Or are there other people that could hold that title? And even extending that to the 80s, the 70s, the 60s. And so me and Quinn were talking about it, and we decided let's do a pod about it. So here we go. We're going to do our people of the decade. But before we get into that, Quinn, did you watch the Michael Jordan documentary?
I did not.
What are your thoughts on Michael Jordan? Do you have any thoughts on Michael Jordan?
I don't have I'm not very opinionated on either Michael Jordan or the NBA for that matter.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate the drive and the obsessiveness that Michael Jordan had to achieve the acclaim that he did.
Yeah,
I think that's the rarest quality to celebrate, the obsessiveness that he had.
Yeah. And it's also interesting to think that without Michael Jordan, would there be a Kobe Bryant?
I mean, would there be a Kobe Bryant? Yes. I mean, would he have been the same Kobe?
Yeah.
Would he had gone to Philadelphia, the Sixers in the late 2000s when that rumor was floating around?
Yeah, he wanted to get traded there, yeah.
Yeah, we don't know. So,
yeah.
It's difficult to say, but
interesting. So sticking with the sports thing, I just wanted to get your thoughts real quick because I didn't know if you listened or watched the documentary series, which I definitely recommend everybody to check out. It's going to be on Netflix soon, but I want to talk about your Rams since I touched upon that in the intro and the logo, and I heard your thoughts on it. We've talked about it extensively, but we haven't had a conversation about these Rams uniforms and the logo ever since they've come out. We speculated prior on other episodes, but we haven't talked about the actual things. So for the people that haven't listened to your episode where you talk about them, Could you quickly just say what you think about the
Just
logo?
briefly recap.
Yeah.
Well, the logo is some sort of millennial trash. I don't know how else to define it. It's just
Millennial trash.
It's like it's a logo designed by the worst graphic designer at the worst UPS store.
I loved that. When you said that, that killed me, bro. Because you worked at the world's worst UPS store, right?
Yeah. It's bad. It's bad. It's just, it's not football. It doesn't look like a football logo.
No.
It looks like either a soccer or an NBA logo.
And even for an NBA logo, it would look kind of out of place.
It's still a little soft.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I don't know. As far as the uniforms go, they're just, I mean, it's just hard to say. The blue uniforms look like a Blu-ray DVD. The yellow uniforms, I mean, they're the yellow uniforms.
Why yellow? That's my question. It's like,
I have no idea. I don't understand the concept. I think I think there's some sort of relation to sunshine. I think that's kind of the idea they were going for. Ocean and sunshine. LA, the beach. I think that's kind of the idea what they were going for. But man, it's just terrible. The bone jerseys, quote unquote, the bone jerseys were growing on me a little bit just because they are at least somewhat unique. They are off white. They're one of the first. I think they may be the first team to have a off white.
Are they?
Uni like that. I thought I saw somewhere they had to get permission from the NFL to actually use those jerseys.
I thought the Jets had an off white, like it was a tint.
I don't know. I don't know if the Jets have been off white, but they've been off winning for.
True. I'm not gonna. Yeah,
forever.
They need another. Huh?
Yeah, I was gonna say. I thought calling them bone jerseys themselves is just stupid.
Yeah.
If they're going to be bone jerseys, then it should have a Day of the Dead element to it. They should call them smog jerseys because they're the same color as smog. And there's nothing more LA than smog.
Dude, that's true. I would love that. That actually would be kind of clown. I would love that. If they just were like, okay, we're just going super SoCal with these jerseys. Like the good, the bad, the ugly, I don't care. We're just going to rep.
Yeah.
That's respect. I would get them respect, but bone jerseys, because they're like, we want it to reflect the Rams' horns. So it's like, why not you call them like the horn jerseys? But I guess that does sound kind of weird. The horn jerseys.
Well, I was actually thinking, one of the older Rams jerseys where it was actually like almost like the Texans, like it was a deep, deep red and a real dark. Like midnight blue.
Really?
And I was thinking, like, man, they could have brought that red back for these bone jerseys if they would have took the time to celebrate the actual culture of Southern California, of Los Angeles, the Chicano culture, the Los Angelian Mexican culture.
Mm-hmm.
But no.
No, instead they decided to look to the Golden State Warriors jerseys, and they're like, well, they're a good team. Let's just literally just make those football uniforms. And it's just like,
they're the most bland pastel white bread jerseys of all time. They're in no way reflective of California. What's great about the Raiders, the Raiders colors, the silver and black, is that they're so, identifiable with California.
Yeah.
Honestly, if for silver or black, my second thought beyond a Raiders jersey is a freaking flannel.
Oh yeah,
is a Northern California flannel, man, silver and black, buttoned up.
The San Joaquin flannel, the 209 tux, the 209 tux,
the 209 tux, the silver and black flannel buttoned up.
with the sunglasses, the Oakleys, bro.
The Oakleys and the fitted cap.
Yep. The fitted cap and the FUBU fucking
No, it'd be a pair of black Dickies.
Would they be black Dickies or jeans? Because I've seen a lot of Raiders fans wear the jeans.
It could be jeans, but
the
jean
shorts.
lieutenants, the higher up officials.
Yeah. You gotta have the Dickies. Or they have the Pendletons, bro. That's a NorCal staple, yeah. No, that's just California. You see those in SoCal too.
Or I mean, even with the Niners, the red and the gold is identifiable,
Yeah.
with the 49ers. The blue and the yellow is identifiable with the Rams if it follows the same Ram pattern.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because our colors are so interchangeable with the Chargers, man, and it's so depressing to be, to be the ugly big brother to the the Los Angeles Chargers.
I know, you guys are the Fredo to the Michael. You guys are the Fredo, bro.
I'm smart too. I make good decisions.
You guys are, dude. And
no, we're the Sunny. We are the Sunny.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
We're the Sunny, and the Raiders are the Tom Egan.
Oh my god. Or who's the dude that comes in who's like, "Thank you for having me on your daughter's wedding day." Not
Luca Brasi?
Luca Brasi. The Raiders are the Luca
gangster,
Brasi.
The OG himself.
The Raiders are the Luca Brasi. They've seen better days, but they got to go. They just got to go.
Inviting me on this day, your daughter's wedding. May it be a beautiful day, and may she bear you many sons.
Jesus Christ, man, we got to do a whole Godfathers podcast at some point.
Depends, man. Do you watch The Godfather? How do you watch it? Do you watch it chronologically, timeline wise, or do you watch it release date wise?
I have the epic version.
So you've watched it chronologically.
That's what I've seen. But I wouldn't mind watching it the how they were released.
See,
honestly, if we just watch 1 and 2, if we just watch 1 and 2, I'm happy.
Yeah, Godfather 3 is tough.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really need to see the third one, but I mean, if we have to, we will. But that's a conversation for off the pod, I guess. But that would be fun because you and I have Godfather references for days. So, but yeah, Rams uniforms could have been better. But if we know anything about NFL uniforms, it seems like they're changing every fucking year now. Like, it seems like just like 3 years ago, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers brought out those Jameis Winston jerseys, which that's what I call him because he's the only quarterback that they had while they had him. And then now they're back to their like championship jerseys. So for all we know, in 3 years, the Rams will go back to their old school jerseys. I think the Jets will too.
If there's anything that the NFL should adopt it from other sports, it is the jersey variation of the NBA.
Yeah.
They should have jerseys unique to either occasions or cities. You know how like Golden State had the city jersey and it had like the Chinese lion on the front, kind of, shouted out Chinatown. That was so gangster.
That was sick. That was really cool. And then the Kings had like jerseys with like Hindu like symbols on it and stuff because Vivek Ranadive is the owner, so he had like that done. I think there's a pretty big like Indian
shout out
population.
to the Hindu Sikh population.
Yep, they're
Sacramento. I believe that. I believe that.
There's a pretty big population of them too, so it's like it's cool to shout them out. Like, why not? But I guess not everybody agrees.
No, I think it was cool. I was actually thinking the other day the Kings also could have done like a Chinese sort of a New Year's lion sort of thing to shout out the Hmong population.
Yeah, because there's a lot of
giant Hmong population in Sacramento.
Huge. It's huge. I like it a lot. Yeah, whatever. I've been trying to work on my Donald Trump impression. It's not that great, but we'll see. It might get better. Who knows? All right. So now that we've responded to the analysis of Quinn Kalani on the logos, we know his thought process, we know mine. We're going to see what happens with the NFL season. Hopefully it happens. Hopefully they allow fans in. Hopefully things go well. We will talk about sports more in future episodes. But now it is the moment we've all been waiting for. It's time to reveal our lists of people of each decade. So I think we're starting with the 60s, right? And then we'll move up. Is that how you want to do it? Or do you want to just...
Sure.
Okay.
Sure, yeah. Ascending order.
So I will... So how we'll do it is we'll say who it is, and then we'll argue. We'll give our statement as to why, and then we'll give the other person a chance to respond, see if they get it or if they want to argue, and then we'll see what happens.
Perfect.
Okay, so Quinn, I will let you do the honors. Who is your entity?
So I will be going first.
Entity of the 60s, because it doesn't have to be like a person necessarily.
Well, I did people.
Okay.
For each one. And it's really difficult to think about. Everyone on my list is an American. I thought about this through an American lens.
Okay. That's fine.
You know, with whatever, you know, reservoirs of American history I could pull out of. In the 1960s, you know, this is a time of disobedience. It's counterculture, you know, Vietnam, civil rights movements, women's rights movements, you know, Native American rights movements. Everything is just blowing up. The individual that I chose that represents the 1960s for me has always been a representative of the downtrodden, of the forgotten, of the lower class, and that is the man in black himself, Johnny Cash.
Ooh, the NorCal King.
NorCal King. In fact, let me just rattle off some of these classic albums that he released in the 60s alone.
Okay.
1962, The Sound of Johnny Cash. 1964, I Walk the Line.
Ooh, classic.
1964, Bitter Tears.
That's another
that
classic.
album featured the classic jam, The Ballad of Ira Hayes. 1968, Live at Folsom Prison. 1969, Live at San Quentin. I mean, these are
San Quentin.
Yeah, these are all-time classic jams, man.
Oh yeah.
And you know, Johnny Cash, what he represents, his image, his persona.
Yeah.
You know, who he represents. You know, I think he's the perfect symbol for this sort of time.
Very interesting pick. I honestly, I don't hate the pick. I think that makes a lot of sense for what he represents and how he was able to speak to literally every section of society. And I think he understood that so well, and he was just able to get points across to other sides. Like how his song, What is Truth, which basically is a song about the civil rights movement and like how like fucked up.
Yeah. He played that at Ronald Reagan's dinner.
Yeah, he played
Not
it
Ronald Reagan, Richard Nixon's.
Nixon's, yeah. And like just how he was able to get people to understand the other side through his music. Because all sides had utmost respect for him, and that is so. I honestly don't know if there's been anybody like that since who literally is universally loved and will have their opinions be accepted in that way and not be just like have things thrown back at them for voicing a certain opinion. Like everybody loved him. Maybe there were some people who were like, "Oh, this guy's a fucking communist," or "This guy's a regressive," or "This guy, you know, he personifies an image of America that is super idealistic and is entrenched in racism," or you know, because he plays just country music in general, which was actually created by African Americans. But anyways, I mean, you could spin it any way, but I just think he was able to speak to almost everybody. Like it's crazy.
No, he was the great translator.
Yes, that's amazing. Yeah.
It seems like anyone from any walk of life could express to Johnny their story, and then he could translate it to someone from a completely different walk of life,
Mm-hmm.
and they would get it. And that's such a unique skill. And I don't think I think that came with a cost. Johnny Cash's life, he was not an easy road.
No, not at all.
He he carried a significant cross with him everywhere he went, and I think, man, just that kind of that lived pain is so, it's so rare to find in mainstream music nowadays.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Everything Johnny Cash said comes from such an authentic, pure place. That's why he's in multiple Hall of Fames across multiple genres.
Oh yeah.
That's why, he starts off with Sun Records and he finishes with Rick motherfucking Rubin.
The man Rick Rubin, Jesus Christ.
Like everyone from, all walks of life, played tribute to the altar that is the Man in Black. So,
and the fact that he covered 9 Inch Nails.
Oh, dude, and he in fact took it and made it even better, man.
Dude, I that's an argument for another day, but it's definitely different. And it's like both are great. I love the original, but like that Johnny Cash version, and
they're completely separate songs.
No, they're completely separate, and the fact that that was like his last hit.
Yeah.
And oh my God. Just the idea that Trent Reznor wrote a song that was Johnny Cash's last, like, real big statement to the world. It's fucking legendary. Amazing. But anyway.
Legendary, man. Johnny Cash is much like Tupac,
Mm-hmm.
Compilation albums are still coming out to this day.
Oh, yeah. I don't think they'll ever stop. And
no,
the thing is, with Johnny Cash's music, it's timeless. Completely timeless.
Dude, it's so timeless. I in preparation for today, I was re-listening to some classic Johnny Cash songs. I grew up on Johnny Cash music. My grandfather, Pepaw, grew up in Memphis, and he used to remember. He told us a story once of seeing Johnny Cash.
Oh, really?
Yeah, when he used to play Little League Baseball, he saw Johnny Cash driving a long black Cadillac in the streets of Memphis.
What the fuck?
And Johnny Cash was just the image of cool, man. Cadillac is my favorite car because Johnny Cash.
Yeah.
Black is my favorite color on a car because of Johnny Cash. I like black clothing, because Johnny Cash,
Me too. I mean, he influenced a lot. I mean, before, I don't know, he just took that image of like that outlaw, like kind of like,
he flipped it.
Yeah, he flipped it from being like the outlaw that's like, oh, that's bad, to outlaw being like, no, like,
yeah,
kind of a Robin Hood character.
He took the symbolic, the symbolism of the color black from this abysmal, mysterious unknown to being representative of the oppressed,
mm-hmm.
of the downtrodden. And of course, there are other folks that have done that. But I'm just simply saying that Johnny Cash, in his own way, created a wider perspective for that.
I agree.
So that was my pick for the 60s. Yeah. I felt it was pretty solid.
Okay, so I had a list that I sent you the other night.
Did you call an audible?
Look, I know we'll do honorable mentions later, but this guy, yeah. There's an argument to be made, okay? There's an argument to be made that the person from the 1970s, who I'm going to say, could have been the person of the 60s. There is an argument to be made, but I'm sticking with the list that I gave you, okay? And I will listen to arguments. That's fine. I understand. However, I got to give it up to, we're sticking with the music, and we're going international. We're going British Invasion. It's obvious who this is going to be. The Beatles are my entity of the 1960s. They along with Johnny Cash, I feel like hand in hand, they flipped the music industry on its head. Maybe the Beatles more so than Johnny Cash, because Johnny Cash had a lot to do with like Americana, and the Beatles just overall, like their sounds and the amount of music they put out in a matter of like 6 years. We have a poster in my music room of all these releases that the Beatles put out between 1964 and 1970. Dude, they put out over like fucking 15 albums of worth of music. And of course, you only know of the number one hits. Like, that's mainly what people listen to. But if you listen to the deep cuts, there's some really experimental shit going on that, I mean, artists for decades afterwards have taken influence from and are still are today. The idea that they are the precursor to, I mean, obviously rock music, but also how they've had an influence in world music. They were influenced by a lot of Indian music, a lot of very psychedelic music. They were like the precursor to a lot of genres we know today. And there's an argument to be had that R&B wouldn't be the same without them. There's an argument to be had, and then obviously without R&B, you don't have rap and hip hop, and then boom, So it really feels, and there's a lot of things to be said about the Beatles. A lot of good, bad, ugly things that could be said about the Beatles, but they had a gigantic influence about the 1960s. And just like Johnny Cash, I feel like their music will live on forever. And the fact that Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr are still around to this day, honestly, I feel like doesn't get talked about enough. The fact that they're still here, 2 members from the biggest, and I don't think it's even an argument, just the biggest rock band of all time. Like, fuck. Like, that's, like, they're still here. That's pretty epic. And I hope I ever get a chance to at least see one of them in person before they pass on. But yeah, I will open the floor. Quinn, what do you think?
Well, at full disclosure, I am a complete and utter Beatles novice. So but I can't dispute their cultural and historical impact and significance. So I can't push back on anything that you said. All I can really say is that, I was never really into the Beatles.
Yeah.
It was never really my vibe. It is interesting though, because I was really into acid rock.
Yeah.
And there is a path, there is a a breadcrumb trail, from bands like Donovan and the Grateful Dead. Season of the Witch, Year of the Cat, all these great jams that you can trace all the way back to the Beatles. So, I mean, you can't praise a house without observing its foundation, and the Beatles are the foundation for so many houses of music.
Oh yeah. I mean, even how the industry works is so different. I mean, you look at just during that time, how many bands were trying to copy the Beatles. Like, they straight up dressed like them. They grew out their hair just like them. The Monkees were literally a corporate version of the Beatles that were created for TV because the Beatles didn't want to do a TV show anymore. They had a TV show for like a year and they were like, I don't want to do it anymore. It's pretty boring. So then
talking about the Monkees, old boy standing there in front of the piano. There is a house.
That's not the Monkees. What the fuck? That's
what?
Not the Monkees. That's not the Monkees. The Monkees.
That's not the Monkees.
Hey, it's the Monkees. Da 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 da.
Who sings House of Rising Sun?
Davy Jones was in the Monkees, bro. No, House of the Rising Sun is the fucking. Is it the Animals?
Yes, the Animals.
Yeah.
Fair play.
Yeah. No, the Animals were, dude. Oh my god. They were fucking great. Without the animals, you wouldn't have had Jimi Hendrix, but that's a story for another time. But yeah, I love the Beatles. They've influenced my songwriting. That's the music I grew up on. My parents are huge Beatles fans. My dad is hugely influenced by the Beatles, and my mom is too. And so I have to tip my hat to those four guys. They paved the way for a lot of music, and you could even argue that they really pushed, like they were like the precursor to heavy metal too. Like their song, Helter Skelter. You listen to it and you just listen. You show that song to somebody who's never listened to a Beatles song. You play that for them, and then you ask them, okay, who was that? Like what band? They would never guess the Beatles, and you tell them, it just blows their mind because they're like, what? No way.
All right, so, I got a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Which British band creates a more visceral world simply through their music? I'm gonna give you three options: the Beatles, Led Zeppelin, or Pink Floyd.
That's an impossible question to answer. Like they all paint different pictures, and it's hard to really pick one that paints a better picture because they're just so different. That's like arguing like.
Well, you have to answer the question, Marco. You can't have your pudding if you don't have your meat.
Well, okay. The thing is, those are
and you can't eat your meat if you don't have your pudding.
Shut up. Obviously, I know which one you're leaning towards, but okay, they're all from three different decades. I mean, Led Zeppelin did start in the 60s, but generally they're known as a 70s staple. Pink Floyd started in the 70s, I believe, but they're known as more of an 80s staple too, and late 70s, early 80s. I honestly would say that Pink Floyd's approach to just albums in general changed the way that people like consume albums and stuff. Like they did a lot of concept work and things like that I'm not going to say never was done before them, but wasn't as done as good. So they really changed the game in that respect. So for that, when you talk about world building and creating a cohesive story across an album, I feel like the Pink Floyd definitely does that. However, I would argue that the Beatles paint amazing pictures within the songs themselves. And then Led Zeppelin's kind of in between. They do both, but I wouldn't say they do it like as good as, either the Pink Floyd or the Beatles. But that's just my opinion.
Better animated movie, Yellow Submarine or The Wall?
Dude, Yellow Submarine is the biggest trip of all time. That movie is oh my god. I can't believe I watched that movie on repeat when I was a baby. Maybe that explains why I am how I am now. But yeah, I watched that movie a lot. But anyways, going on with the list, that's my 1960s pick.
Why don't you segue into the 70s?
The 70s. Now, this is the person. Okay. This person, like I said, easily could be Mr. 1960s. However, I went with the Beatles, and this person had a lot to do with the 70s as well. Maybe wasn't exactly their prime, but they had a lot to do with the culture of the time and a lot of other things. None other than, I'll say it, I don't give a shit, the greatest boxer of all time, Muhammad Ali. 1970s. Mr. 1970s. And I think it makes a lot of sense. In the 70s, he had the Thrilla in Manila. Let me see. Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, what were you going to say?
I was going to ask you, I can't remember my timeline, but was he stripped and forced into a 3-year exile from boxing in the 70s or the late 60s?
It looks like it was the late 60s when that happened.
And then he came back in the 70s.
Yes.
The second half of his career.
Mm-hmm.
Which is probably the most culturally significant part. Got you.
Yes. And he fought, let's see.
Does it kind of start with Ken Norton?
Ken Norton. Yeah, it does.
Damn, Quinn.
Yep, and he let's see,
The Fraser trilogy.
Yep, the Fraser trilogy, which honestly was like the storyline of the 70s. I mean, what else did they have to talk about? Okay, there was really great like Motown, and like that was kind of the start, like late 70s was kind of the start of disco. And then they had a giant recession where like nobody could get gas for like a year.
Mm.
And then you have Muhammad Ali. Like, I don't know. I don't know much about him as much as I do the Beatles, or any of the other people that I'm going to be talking about. However, I think he deserves to be on the list at some point. And you could say he was in the 60s, but his career bled into the 70s, and I couldn't think of anybody who's like single-handedly had a footprint just as a person, just being alive. Because even if Muhammad Ali would have stopped boxing in the 60s and just would have lived in the 70s, just his cultural impact, like civil rights wise, and his impact, how he influenced the perception of Islam in America, had such big and profound impacts too. So, that's my argument for Muhammad Ali in the 70s.
Yeah, I'd say Muhammad Ali is the perfect example of how someone can use their platform to either emphasize or illuminate a grave injustice within society. Shout out, of course, Muhammad Ali, born Cassius Clay, Louisville, Kentucky. So shout out to Kentucky always. Yeah, Muhammad Ali, I think there's a strong argument to make that he's not only the greatest boxer of all time. I wouldn't, I don't think I'd say that, technically speaking, but as far as cultural significance, impact, societal influence, skill inside the ring, Muhammad Ali is probably, undisputably the greatest boxer of all time. But I think, in a Downtown Abbey sort of sense, you could also say that he's also the greatest sportsman of all time. And what a quote unquote sportsman represents, what a sportsman should represent. I remember, in the 90s, I can't remember if it was 96 or 92 or whenever, when he hoisted the Olympic flame.
Yeah.
And he lit the torch.
No, was that in the 90s? Yeah,
I think it was in the 90s. I think it was in the early 90s.
I thought it was, the Atlanta Olympics, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
That was 90.
I'm pretty sure.
That was 96.
96?
Yeah.
92 or 96?
92 was the Dream Team, and that was out in Europe, I believe. So, yeah, it was 96, I think.
Yeah, and who better to to hold the flame of Prometheus himself than the great one, Muhammad Ali.
And just his influence on also like just boxing and other forms of combat sports. Like,
oh yeah, I mean, he laid the blueprint for how combat athletes should promote themselves.
Yes.
I mean, without Muhammad Ali, and his promotional capabilities, do you have a Floyd Mayweather? Do you have a Conor McGregor? A Chael P. Sonnen? The American Gangster from
Chucky
Westland,
Liddell,
Oregon?
a Tito Ortiz.
Yeah, I mean, I think every combat sport athlete owes a great debt to Muhammad Ali.
I agree. All right.
I think it's a very, very fine choice.
So what is your 70s pick? I'm very curious because I don't know your list.
Choice. My 70s choice jives with yours a little bit, man. Though to be honest, his time in the 70s was very short spent. His impact afterwards, has been felt nonetheless. My choice for the decade-defining face of the 1970s, I choose one of NorCal's very own, San Francisco's very own, Bruce Lee.
Ooh.
The dragon himself, man.
Yeah, that does correlate with Muhammad Ali a lot, actually.
Yeah.
They had a couple run-ins too. Yeah.
Much how Muhammad Ali, did such great and fantastic work in changing the perception of Islam and Islamic Americans. It wasn't cool to be Chinese
Yeah.
before Bruce Lee. Chinese folk were often ostracized and disparaged within American society, kept at arm's length. Bruce Lee changed all of this. Bruce, there's the reason why there's a karate school in your your shitfuck town is because of Bruce Lee.
In Dubuque, Iowa, as you love to say.
The reason why there's a karate gym in Dubuque, Iowa is because someone watched The Way of the Dragon there.
That's true. I can't dispute that. I don't really have anything else to say other than Bruce Lee is a legend. And without him and Muhammad Ali, combat sports or just sports in general, like, I mean, think about like Odell Beckham Jr. and a lot of, like Patrick Beverly and guys in the NBA who are pretty flamboyant and really show off the personality and kind of play it up for the cameras sometimes, and they make it fun. Or even WWE or pro wrestling promotions. Like, without those two guys, you don't have anything we have today. And that's what's interesting about the first four picks, Johnny Cash, the Beatles, Muhammad Ali, and Bruce Lee, that I've seen, is that they're foundational pieces culturally that you cannot, like, they're just like I said, they're the foundation of our culture.
Yeah.
Modernly speaking.
They're game changers.
Exactly.
We've chosen nothing but game changers. What Bruce Lee did for cinema alone, action cinema completely changed with Bruce Lee. Hong Kong cinema, gained international acclaim.
Yeah.
On the back of Bruce Lee.
Exactly.
And speaking from beyond a cinematic perspective, from a philosophical perspective, everyone who watches the show knows I'm a giant mixed martial arts fan.
Yes.
Now, there is a reason why Bruce Lee is included in the UFC Hall of Fame. And that's because his central philosophy of Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fists, the style of no styles, is the core philosophy of MMA.
Yeah. Exactly.
So, there was no way I could look past that and not give props to the sensei, the San Fran sensei himself. The NorCal Dragon, the legend Bruce Lee.
It's true. Yeah, NorCal. See, we're going nothing but NorCal, even though Johnny Cash technically, not, but he had a lot of ties up here. And so since you let me go first on the 70s, I'll let you go first on the 80s.
Going into the 1980s, I'm taking a bit of a different approach here. I'm picking someone who I revere as a deity, almost. I almost deify this person. Another Californian. I'm not sure if he would consider himself a Central Californian or if he would join us in the Nick Diaz army as a Northern Californian. I am picking of the 1980s, the writer of these films: Raiders of the Lost Ark, Temple of Doom, The Last Crusade, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi. I am picking the man himself, the king of Skywalker Ranch. I'm picking George Lucas as the decade-defining person of the 80s. Man, you're talking about two massive franchise, both Star Wars and Indiana Jones, who are both, those franchise for me personally are so massive. I grew up watching Indiana Jones. More specifically, I grew up watching Star Wars, man. Star Wars, the Bushido Code, the Jedi Code. Man, that is gospel for me. And, I have to give props, man. I have to genuflect myself at the altar of George Lucas. I have such a great appreciation for anyone who is a universe builder, who is a creator. And this man solely created an entire universe that the rest of us are here to enjoy. And if I could also just give a tip of the hat to his business acumen for securing the toy rights for Star
dude,
Wars.
yeah.
when all the studios thought this movie isn't gonna do shit, this Star Wars, this space opera flick, and George sitting there just twirling his goatee was like, oh yeah, I'll take the toy rights. Skywalker Ranch later.
Thank you very much. And then just for 40 years later or 30 years later, he just sells it to fucking Disney. But anyways, we don't have to get into that.
Yeah, we don't have to get into that, but know this, Star Wars fans, Star Wars hopefuls, loyal members of the Jedi Council. Dave Filoni is the heir apparent, the apprentice, and in Dave Filoni we place our faith. So my pick for the 1980s was George Lucas. There's so much great cinema in the 1980s. There were some other directors that I really, really thought about. But for me, these two massive franchises, this is the start of franchise cinema that we know today.
Blockbuster cinema, yeah.
Yeah, blockbuster cinema. The blockbuster itself started by Steven Spielberg with Jaws in the 70s, but franchise cinema, episodic silver screen, viewing.
Yeah.
George Lucas is at the foundation of that. Another foundational piece in our culture. George Lucas is the fucking man. All hail George Lucas.
Wow. Big words. But I cannot, although I do disagree for him being decade defining, I don't hate the pick. Makes sense. Very compelling argument. And I like you said, Star Wars has had a huge impact on my life. And like following the trend, changed the game of cinema when Star Wars came out. Literally, I took a film class a couple years ago. I don't know. It's maybe been 3 years at this point. But the professor literally was like, we're going to study film up to Star Wars. Because once that happens, I mean, we know, like, I don't have to teach you anything. Like, you see the outcome of Star Wars every day when you're watching TV, in the trailers, in the promotion, in the licensing, and like everything Quinn said. So
quite literally, there's cinema before Star Wars and there's cinema after Star Wars.
Yes.
And by virtue, there's life before Star Wars and there's life after Star Wars.
Yep.
I would almost love to just like go back before A New Hope drops and just experience what life is in a world without Star Wars.
I can't imagine, but
I'd imagine it just being hopeless and destitute. And, this is probably Vietnam. People are being oppressed. All this craziness is going on because there's no hope in their lives. What Star Wars gives us is hope.
A new hope. And sticking with the game changer vibe, or not even vibe, just the theme, I should say, of this episode and of these picks. My man literally is Mr. 80s. Now, there's a couple guys that I could have gone with. I'm sorry. Also a lady that you could have gone with. There's a lot of people who could have defined the 80s, who you could have technically say, you can make an argument for. George Lucas being one. A lot of things happened in the 80s. And I will give honorable mentions at the very end of who was really close to making the cut. But you just cannot, and I know that this person's been in hot water, although this person is now passed on, deceased. I know this person's been in hot water because of a documentary that came out, and that's neither here nor there when it comes to their cultural impact. Michael Jackson. You cannot deny that this guy changed so much for when it came to just like solo artists and dance music and just like every R&B and everything. He was the face of the 80s from a marketing standpoint. from a music standpoint, from a heartthrob standpoint, even though he was more of a teenage heartthrob in like the fucking 70s. But he really, he defined the 80s. Thriller is still, I believe it was charting a couple of years ago. Like that album just like randomly like just comes back on the charts, and like
every year around October there's a spike
mm-hmm.
in Thriller.
And Thriller, that album, of course, that's the album everybody knows for the song Thriller. It's a Halloween anthem. It's a spooky anthem. But you listen to the whole album, that's a fucking awesome album. Great. Produced amazingly. The man Quincy Jones outdid himself. And, he's also another questionable character. But the influence that Michael Jackson has had on fashion, on music, cinema, television, just how you carry yourself as a celebrity, he was the man. He was the man, and nobody really could dispute that except for maybe Prince. But that's another argument for another time.
Yeah, I'm more of a Prince guy myself. But speaking from a cinematic perspective, there is music videos before Michael Jackson and there's music videos after Michael Jackson. Not only, if we weren't even not to talk about Thriller, we were to talk about Smooth Criminal or Billie Jean or, Man in the Mirror, Michael Jackson videos are so cinematic. There's a narrative, there's a point A to a point B, there's a clear arc.
Yep.
And yeah, man, great appreciation for the King of Pop. I don't think personally he diddled those kids. I don't mind saying it.
Wow, really?
Well, at least in that documentary,
oh.
the Leaving Netherland documentary, that was a sus documentary, man. But
interesting statement.
I don't know. What'd you think about that documentary?
I think bro, how could you say he didn't fucking do it, bro?
I'm not saying he didn't diddle any kids.
Uh-huh.
I'm saying I'm not sure if he diddled those kids.
Okay.
I'm definitely 99.9% Michael Jackson at some point or another diddled a boy.
Yeah.
or a kid.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure if it was those kids.
You think that they were kind of just out to try to get some cash?
No, I mean I don't want to make presumptions. I'll just say that I didn't walk away from the documentary with a clear
you weren't
judgment.
Convinced. Okay. I see. I get it.
Not on, not on the person, but on this specific case.
I understand.
I definitely think Michael Jackson diddled kids. You don't have a fucking ranch and roller coasters in your backyard if you're not meaning to diddle kids.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like your ice cream truck driver, Super Saiyan times 4.
That's pretty sus, dude.
It's super sus. And quite honestly, I think too much of the shame goes, well, no, the appropriate amount of shame goes to Michael Jackson. Not enough shame goes to the parents of these children who let their children sleep over at a grown man's house.
Yeah. But that's just how much influence he had over that decade, where it's like it's Michael Jackson. Like, it's Michael Jackson.
That proves the point. It proves the point. It proves your point.
It's crazy, man. And
yeah, Michael Jackson, Sith Lord. Think about that.
Dude, Michael Jackson's that fucking Emperor Palpatine, dude.
He is the Sith Lord Jar Jar Binks theory.
True. Okay, so since you went ahead and did the beginning of the 80s, I'll do the beginning of the 90s. We're going from Michael to Michael. I already talked about this person. He owned the 1990s. He just had a documentary, The Last Dance, detail his last season playing for the Chicago Bulls in 97 and 98, where they beat the Utah Jazz, as they should have, in the finals to get their 6th championship. I'm talking about none other than Michael B. Jordan. I'm just kidding. Michael Jordan. He man, after watching that documentary, dude, it's insane just how many moments, signature moments, Michael Jordan had across his career where people can literally just be like, hey, do you remember when Michael Jordan like had the fucking flu, which we find out actually was a spoiled pizza. Dude, this guy had food poisoning from a pizza the night before.
Yo, how old was that pizza?
I don't want to know.
That pizza was spoiled, man.
Dude,
I've eaten pizza 2 weeks after I've ordered it, bro, and it has been mwah.
Well, what's the theory is that whoever made the pizza put like rotten meat on it, and Michael Jordan, being super fucking hungry the night before a game, just was like, fuck it, I'm eating this damn pizza, and he didn't know it was spoiled. And that the rest is history. And those people in Utah fucked him over. But he came back, and in that game, he lit him up. So it's like, you know where you were at when Michael Jordan like had a certain moment when like he hit the pass to John Paxson, and they won that game, or like, or where they beat Charles Barkley's Suns with the former mayor of Sacramento, Kevin Johnson, on the squad, or, where you were when you found out Michael Jordan was leaving basketball to play baseball, or if you watch Space Jam.
The moment, how you felt when Bill Murray came in to save the game.
Dude.
And you realize that there is a better basketball player out there besides Michael Jordan, and it's Bill Murray.
In 10 seconds had an assist and a rebound. The assist and the rebound of the game. To save the world from the Monstars. Yeah, craziness. But also, Lola Bunny, very underrated player. Very underrated member of that squad. A straight baller. She was the Pippin to Michael Jordan's LeBron. Oh boy, Michael Jordan's Jordan. So
she was something, all right.
Yeah, she was. So Michael Jordan.
She was the first in a foray down a dark road.
A foray. A furry. Yeah. So she.
Unintentional pun.
Yeah, very, very, very punny. Michael Jordan, the man of the 90s. I mean, without him, like, I don't know. You just can't think of the 90s without him. The commercials, the endorsements, Jordan brand, the movies. I mean, the only controversy he really had was his father passing away tragically, and the gambling, which is questionable even in itself. So at that point, and the bullying, which, I mean, at this point, it seems like everyone's kind of accepted. Okay, he was an asshole.
Yeah, it seems like the greatest tend to be.
Yeah, so Michael Jordan's my man of the 90s. What do you think?
Can I ask you, Horace Grant recently came out and said 90% of everything in The Last Dance was horse shit, and cited that, people should look to the fact that Michael Jordan was a producer on The Last Dance. Now, I can't confirm any of this because I haven't watched any of it, but from the article that I read, Horace Grant is citing, a bias, a production bias. Do you have any opinion on that?
Yeah, I have a huge opinion. I think Horace Grant is a fucking idiot because look, you are Michael Jordan. Of course, you're going to have influence over a documentary, but is it worth it? Is it work? If, as a fan, going into it knowing that there is bias, you can still take away some truth from that. Like, okay, if Scottie Pippen wasn't able to say his truth, Phil Jackson wasn't able to say his truth, I don't think they would have wanted to be in this documentary at all, speaking within it. If they had to lie and totally just like bullshit everything to save Michael Jordan's ass, come on. They wouldn't have done it. They wouldn't. And the thing is, Michael Jordan says some things in the documentary, admits to some things that aren't the best, that don't put him in the best light. I mean, he knows he was a fucking dick to his teammates for the most part, but he even talks about it saying, like, I just really wanted to win, and I'm addicted to competition, and it's not, sometimes it's not the best thing, but, like, hey, like, here I am talking about it. And if my question to Horace Grant would be, okay, you can think it's bullshit, but you were there, and you're in this documentary. You're in it! So why would, if it's bullshit, why were you part of this? Why were you feeding into that? Do you just want the paycheck? At that point, then you're no better than Michael Jordan, Horace Grant. You're not. So
yeah, it's I don't know. I would question, what does Michael Jordan care what people think about him at this stage? I don't think Michael Jordan has ever cared about public perception, to be 100% honest with you. At least that's the vibe I get.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm sure to a degree there's a bit of production bias, when you are the executive producer of your own documentary. I'm sure to a degree, whether it be a large or a small degree, there was some sort of
yeah,
some sort of favor lent towards Michael Jordan.
Oh, of course.
That's to be expected. I mean, for Christ's sakes, he funded it. So
I mean, he had to. That's the thing. It's like ESPN has been wanting to make this documentary for like fucking 10 years. And he said no in every time they've come to him with an idea to do this. They said no. He said no, I'm not interested. Finally, he did. Finally, he was interested because they threw enough money at him. Because they're like, hey, we have Netflix backing this too. We have all of these other. We have this really great director. We have Scotty on board. We have Phil Jackson on board. We have fucking B.J. Anderson on board. We have Horace Grant on board. The guy
Tony Kukoc on board.
Yeah, Tony Kukoc, who famously got like blitzed in the '92 Olympics, which they talk about in this documentary, and like became Jordan's teammate. And they have all these people on board. Finally, he does it. I mean, you got to give the guy something. If you want an honest, 100% honest documentary, I mean, you're not going to get it. You'll never get it. I mean, that doesn't exist. The closest thing you get is like an OJ type of documentary, and the fool killed somebody, multiple people. That's why you can make that honest of a documentary on OJ. You can't do that on Michael Jordan. What the fuck did he do? He didn't do anything wrong.
No, I mean, and I've made this point in some discussions in some of my classes. Film, cinema itself, whether it be documentary, fiction or nonfiction, there is you can't force objectivity on an inherently subjective art form.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. It's 100% the truth. But in any case, that is my man or person of the 90s, Michael Jordan. What about you, Quinn? I'm curious to see who you got.
For the 90s, now this one I had to boil down. The 90s are such a unique time, economically, fairly stable. Yet there's Waco. There's the Oklahoma City bombings. There's the Unabomber has reemerged. All this craziness is going on. Bill Clinton, Monica Lewinsky. All this craziness is going on. There's a attitude about the 1990s that
I know exactly who this is.
That is.
Can I tell you my pick?
That is apparent. I'm sure you know what it is.
No, but I'm gonna
go.
Anthony Kiedis.
You fell flat.
I know who it is. I
actually cheated on this one, and I have a duo that I'm putting out there for the 1990s.
It's fine.
The duo, it can't be anyone other than the Texas Rattlesnake, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and the most electrifying man in sports entertainment, The Rock.
Dwayne The Rock Johnson, yeah.
And I chose these two guys as symbols for the 1990s as a whole. My other choices have either been foundational, cultural, aspects, cultural builders. These guys are really simply just symbolic representations from 1990 to 1999. You know, in the 90s, there's this veil of everything's okay. And then underneath, there's just this griminess.
Yeah.
This sort of
grunginess.
Yeah,
Wink,
a grunginess. Wink. Yeah. There's it's like a bacterial infection underneath the skin that, you know, that we don't really reap the ill-suited benefits of till the 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
But for the 1990s, Stone Cold, The Rock, you know, the Nation of Domination, anti-authoritarian, capitalism, you know, when The Rock decided to become Hollywood, when he finally became a heel, you know, and he was wearing silk shirts and aviators, telling people, you know your role, SmackDown Boulevard, you know.
Yeah.
And the dichotomy, the clash, the juxtaposition between Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock, which is essentially, you know, a classist battle.
Yep.
You know, it is the individualistic freedoms, the anti-authoritarian freedoms of Stone Cold Steve Austin versus the capitalistic, the us mentality, the flamboyant, the showman, the showman, you know, the entertainment driven corporate product of the Rock.
Yeah.
Constantly battling each other.
I can't argue against it, dude. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. They're two icons of the 90s, and like you said, their relationship with each other and against each other definitely highlights the cracks that were showing within the culture of the 1990s. And it's interesting to think that the 80s were this time revered by so many people. And then, you know, you think the 80s Reaganism and all this shit, and like the economy's doing pretty good. But then the cracks start to show, and the cracks are the 90s, right? That's when things start to, and then the 2000s, which we'll get into, it's just like the cracks, these aren't cracks anymore. Like, this is like the San Andreas fault at this point. If you're thinking it's a fucking crack, this ain't a crack. This is a fucking fault. And then now, the 2010s, it's when it's a straight seismic shift. We now have different continents. You know, we're in a different world now. And we'll get to that
Pompeii
later.
by Avenici.
Yeah. But yeah, that's a very good pick. I honestly cannot argue against it. I really like both those guys. I was just listening to The Undertaker on the Bill Simmons podcast today, discussing the Attitude Era and like his career and stuff. First interview I've heard where he speaks super candidly. Really interesting. I recommend it for anybody who wants to check it out. For sure.
I mean, you know, much like you were saying, I honestly can't remember when, you know, the flu game for Michael Jordan, but I remember when Stone Cold Steve Austin drove a beer truck down the ramp and sprayed The Rock and Vince McMahon down. I remember when Steve Austin got thrown off an overpass, you know. I remember
the rivalry,
you know, this craziness.
That rivalry was insane. It saved the WWE or WWF.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah, it was everything for the WWF.
I mean, you think about WCW versus WWF, and without
and you know, there's a sort of racial element too. You know, in a lot of ways, Stone Cold was the great white hope of wrestling. You know, The Rock came in there and he was literally dominating everybody.
Yeah.
You know, if wrestling, you know, was a legit sport, The Rock is Tom Brady. You know, but Stone Cold is there as like, you know, the last guardian there.
Yeah.
And you know, wrestling often plays up stereotypes and stuff like that. That leads to the sort of you know, the examples that I stated earlier of classism, divisiveness, you know, corporatism, individualism. So, yeah, what about yourself for the 1990s?
Well, I said Michael Jordan, but I do agree.
Oh yeah.
I do agree with you. I mean, I can see your argument. It makes a lot of sense. But since I went ahead and I opened up the 90s, I will let you open up to 2000s. Now we're in uncharted territory because you don't know who I picked for the 2000s, 2010s. So this will be a surprise for you. So
I don't know who you picked.
I'll let you go.
For the 2010s, I really thought about. This is like the only decade where I thought I was going to choose someone negative that reflected, that reflected poorly upon America, like whether it was Bernie Madoff or somebody. But ultimately, I decided to go with my Michael Jordan, and for the 2000s, I picked Kobe Bryant as the decade-defining individual. And if anything, then this is my ode to the Mamba, the final farewell of my fandom for not only Los Angeles Laker basketball, but pretty much Kobe Bryant in the 2000s. Man, Michael Jordan has left basically, and there is a giant hole in this sport in arguably its most popular time ever. And no one knows who's going to fill in that gap. At this time in the early 2000s, the talent pool in the NBA is spread out greatly. You got Vince Carter in Toronto. The Orlando Magic is popping. T-Mac. Gary Payton, Ray Allen, Paul Pierce. This is when Ray Allen was still with the Supersonics.
Oh, yeah.
The Jesus Shuttleworth days. Kobe Bryant not only filled in that gap, he filled it in and then took all the air out of it so no one else could fill it in.
But what about LeBron?
I'm not even gonna entertain that. 5 championships, 2000 to 2002, 2009 to 2010. I think, Kobe shares many of the traits that Michael Jordan does, and I don't doubt that within 3 years there'll be a Last Dance 2 featuring Kobe Bryant. But I think the thing that separates Kobe from Michael is his accessibility to the average person. I never felt like there was an air of condescension around Kobe Bryant. I never felt like that I was never invited to anything because of Kobe Bryant. I felt uplifted by Kobe. I don't know, I just found out about this, cold pizza gate that Michael Jordan went through. But what I can tell you is that Kobe Bryant played through, and I'm kind of cheating here, because Kobe played through the majority of the 2010s too. But the sort of wear and tear, the sort of injuries that Kobe played through, the sort of judicial crises that Kobe Bryant played through, and I'm not going to take a side on that. That's a topic for a different day.
Yeah.
But dropping the 81-point game in a response to it, 63-point game. His drive and his motivation, his hard work, his commitment to excellence.
Great Raiders slogan, by the way. Thank you.
No worries. The Mamba mentality. I think that's ultimately his greatest gift. Was not his basketball acumen or the entertainment he provided us with basketball. I honestly haven't watched a complete basketball game from first quarter to fourth quarter since Kobe Bryant retired.
Wow.
It's just been ridiculous. I can't.
No, you went to that Kings Wizards game.
Yeah, I went to the bathroom a couple times. It's just difficult. It's not the same.
Yeah.
Much like how Stone Cold was, a representation of individualism in the 1990s. Kobe Bryant was a representation of individualism in the 2000s. And what I mean by that is, if you look at what other players are starting to do, the trend of free agency, the trend of trades in the 2000s is changing drastically than how it's always been done in professional basketball. Kobe Bryant doesn't follow this trend.
It's true.
Kobe Bryant is the last homegrown franchise player that I think we'll ever see in professional basketball. He was a personal hero of mine. My days are certainly less brighter now that he's gone. A true Renaissance man.
Mm-hmm.
His cultural impact, the Mamba mentality, far exceeded past basketball. Who can forget Lil Wayne's tribute to Kobe Bryant with the Kobe Bryant Jam?
Oh yeah.
Man, I don't think, it's like in Game of Thrones when one of the Knightsmen passed. I feel much of the same way. We shall never see his like again.
Yeah.
So it was a bit of a cheat for me here, but in the 2000s, when I think about my own life, I can remember clear moments of Kobe Bryant excelling, balling out,
Yeah.
Much like how when you're playing pickup football with your friends and you snag a ball on someone and you Randy Mossed them. You don't say you Randy Mossed, you say you mossed them.
Yeah.
If you were Kobe on the court, or if you Kobe'd someone, when your name becomes synonymous with a standard,
yeah,
and that's hard to be ignored.
That is very true, and I cannot disagree with anything you're saying here. I hate that we're basically agreeing to disagree about stuff. But I mean, you're not picking anybody that's just random. It's not you're just it's not like you're picking people that are not deserving. So it's difficult for me to argue against anything you're saying, especially when it's a personal thing, like Kobe Bryant. I know he meant a lot to you, and it's so tragic that he passed away earlier this year. But sticking with somebody who's synonymous with winning and definitely finding second life in his career, because for a time it seemed like this person kind of had their best days in the 2000s, and in the past decade, the 2010s, it's very easy to also argue that this person maybe defined this decade too. However, I'm choosing somebody different for the 2010s. I'm not going to double up because I feel like that's just cheap. But this person definitely, I feel like, defined the 2000s, in my opinion. This was a very close race for me. And I'll tell you who was the runner-up later. But just for the sake of time, I'm just going to go into it. Tom Brady.
Oh, my God.
I'm sorry. I hate it. I hate that I hate that I had to do it. Starting with the Tuck Rule game against my Oakland Raiders, and they were the Oakland Raiders at the time, so it makes sense. Ever since that fateful game, ever since that fateful snowy evening in fucking Foxborough, Massachusetts, Tom Brady did nothing but just ascend and descend and ascend. Now I could have easily been Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. I could have done that, but I really think Tom Brady was more of the cultural face of the 2000s than Bill Belichick was. And I mean, you look at just how his story, first of all, much like Kobe's, is very inspirational. But Tom Brady was a 6th-round pick in, I believe, the 2000 NFL draft or the 2001 NFL draft. No, 2000, I think.
2000.
Yeah,
because Yeah, they beat the Rams in the 2001 Super Bowl.
Yeah. So the 2000 draft, he was a 6th-round pick, chubby quarterback coming out of Michigan. Nobody gave him a second look at all. And then gets a shot when Drew Bledsoe gets hurt. And they throw him in, and the rest is history. And Drew Bledsoe's name goes in the annals of history because that's basically where his career went.
The annals of history. His name has been dragged through the shit, bro.
Yeah, that sucks because he was a pretty decent quarterback too before then. But alas, we live in a world where Tom Brady ascended, and he won against the Rams, against the Panthers, and against who?
Eagles, Philadelphia,
and the Philadelphia Eagles. Could have beaten
twice against the Rams.
Twice?
Yeah, twice in 2001.
And then 2000.
Last year.
Yeah, last year. Okay.
And then Atlanta.
Yeah, and then Atlanta. And he could have had 8 championships if they would have just beaten the damn Giants. But Eli Manning apparently is the answer. But regardless, he won 3 championships in the 2000s and could have and arguably should have more. Was always in the playoffs. Married Giselle. I mean, come on. So they, he was always in the tabloids, always talked about Tom Brady. You hear him everywhere. Everyone knows the man's name. I feel like with football really becoming more popular in the 2000s with the rise of fantasy and all these things, his name just got even bigger. And I think there's really no argument. I mean, I was very close. I'll just say right now, I was very close to saying Peyton Manning. Very close to saying Peyton Manning, but I did Tom Brady instead because I feel like he just is more of a recognizable name, even though Peyton Manning with his fucking State Farm commercials everywhere.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But yeah, that's my 2000s pick.
Wow, I did not see that coming, to be 100% honest with you. That is a left field choice.
Really?
Yeah, I did not see that coming.
Wow.
Is there anything about Tom Brady in the 2000s that is representative of America or American society to you?
Yes.
Like, is there any metaphors or strings that you can attach for us?
Yeah.
To give greater depth.
Yeah. So basically, I would just say, during the 2000s, obviously 9/11 and the Iraq War were the biggest American events, at least. I would say global events too, and the recession and everything too. It was a very active year, but Tom Brady, especially being on the Patriots and being the quarterback of the Patriots, having them turning their franchise around from literally like what the Cleveland Browns are looked at today, from that to the pinnacle of NFL greatness within the decade, because he just added on to his legacy in the 2010s. But he really cemented his place in NFL history in the 2000s with winning those 3 championships with Bill Belichick. So I feel like he was a symbol of hope for the American consciousness during that time, especially being on the Patriots.
Especially in 2001 when they went to the Super Bowl.
Exactly.
I mean, he's just an average schlubby looking Joe.
Yeah.
And then he goes to play for the Patriots, and they go to the Super Bowl to play the most, flamboyant showboating offense in the history of the league, the greatest show on turf.
Yep. Exactly. And then they win. So
yeah,
it's and all those guys on the team, Bill Belichick's seen as a blue collar coach with a blue collar, mentality to how he runs an organization. All those guys on the defense at the time, Teddy Bruschi and all those guys, were blue collar to the T. None of them were amazing stars. They didn't have a whole lot of star-studded talent at the time, and Tom Brady really was the figurehead of that team and really gave some people some grief, but also gave a lot of people somebody to root for just in general. Everyone wanted to see Tom Brady win because of his story. Now, there's a lot of people don't want to see him winning because he does it all the fucking time. But you have to admit the guy's a great player, and he definitely, in my opinion, defined the 2000s, at least in my eyes. So
another NorCal kid, man.
Yeah, he's a NorCal from the Bay. Yeah,
there's a bunch of NorCal kids on our list.
It's true. We're a different breed out here, man.
Respect.
Now,
Well, let me ask you this before we go on about Tom Brady, because I think it's an important discussion. Do you think the upcoming season will validate his importance and his significance over Bill Belichick? So what I'm saying is, if the Tampa Bay Buccaneers represent the NFC in the Super Bowl, regardless if they win, if they just simply go, is that enough for us to say that Tom Brady was the significant percentage
of the equation
of the equation when it came to the Patriots winning?
If they win a Super Bowl?
If they just go.
If they just go to the Super Bowl?
If they just go. I'm not going to say whether they win or whether they lose, but if they just go. How important is this season to Tom Brady to validate himself separately from Bill Belichick?
I think it's very important, and I think he has to. I honestly would say, personally, he just has to get to the playoffs. Tampa Bay has been back page news for the past decade, ever since they've won the Super Bowl with Gruden in 2003.
They've been the bottom of that division for a long time now.
Yeah, and everyone thought Jameis Winston would turn around. He's done nothing. He did nothing. So, other than throw 30 picks and 30 touchdowns, which is impressive in its own way last season. I don't want to get too off on topic of football, but yes, if he goes to the Super Bowl, just goes with Tampa Bay, that means you have to beat the Niners, the Saints, you have to beat the Rams, which, may or may not be okay.
The
Seahawks. Yeah, you have to go through Russell Wilson. Even the Eagles, which I know you're not a big believer in them, but they do have a lot of talent on paper. The Vikings. I mean, there's a lot of good teams and the Cowboys aren't, you can't sleep on them either. They're very unpredictable. They have talent, and they have a great offensive line. So there's a lot of good teams in the NFC they'd have to go through in order to get to that Super Bowl. And if they do that, dude, there's no question. If there was a question that he's the greatest quarterback of all time, there's no question. And then there's no question that he was the important piece, especially if the Patriots with Jarrett Stidham do nothing, which I think he's going to be okay, but that's another conversation for another time.
Yeah.
So with the 2010s, now, honestly, I don't know much about this person. I mean, I know things about them, but I don't know a whole lot. But I think he really did define the 2010s. And when I say the name, you're going to be like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Tommy Wiseau.
That makes no sense.
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. It's not him. Kanye West. Kanye West is my 2010s pick.
Interesting. He was almost my pick for the 2000s. Because George Bush hates black people.
I just think his star definitely ascended even higher once he got with Kim Kardashian, and just like he's revered in the names with among the greatest names of music, because when he puts out an album, it's a cultural event. You could argue Beyonce's there too. I was very much considering putting Beyonce, but I think Kanye just has a little bit more of that star, which I'm gonna get hate for that, but
that twang.
I think, yeah.
That shimmer, that star shimmer.
Yeah, I think so. So that's my pick. We're already running a little bit, so I'm not going to really defend that. Honestly, I could have gone a lot of ways in my 2010 person, but Kanye, I think, just his projects over the course of the 2010s very much is defining of that time.
Interesting.
What about you?
Yeah, I'll speed along here. For my 2010s, I think it's interesting. You had 3 musicians on your list.
Yeah.
And, I'm going to follow suit with my passions. For my 2010, the decade-defining person I have
Jordan Peele.
is... No. I think the greatest filmmaker of the last decade, and that's Kevin Feige.
Ooh.
Kevin Feige is, of
Wow.
course, the head of Marvel Studios. Marvel Studios, the MCU officially started in 2008 with Iron Man. But since 2010 with Iron Man 2, 21 films have come out, including Iron Man 2, and they have grossed a worldwide total of $22.55 billion. It is almost a tradition now to expect a Marvel movie quarterly.
Yeah. For a year.
Yeah. If not 3. Typically it's around that 3. Yeah. 3 Marvel films a year now.
Yep.
Much like how, and what I see Kevin Feige as a continuation from George Lucas. I just see Kevin Feige as like the next level, the next step.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Technology has definitely aided Feige in his quest. Yeah.
Much, universe building, much like George Lucas. I think these characters are a bit more significant in that they hold a place in the modern mythology of people, that these characters themselves are storied. They have the benefit of half a century of stories. But in what I think is the most profitable entertainment medium, which is cinema, in my opinion, you cannot ignore the contributions and the value of the MCU. And we should consider going forward in an attempt to save the theatrical cinematic experience. We will lean heavily, more so than ever, on Kevin Feige and on these films to ensure the continuation of the theatrical experience.
That makes a lot of sense. I like the pick. I can't argue against it. I mean, they had so much influence over the 2010s. They are. I mean, you can't talk about. I mean, the Avengers finished in 2019, for fuck's sake. Like, come on.
It is the decade. I mean, I came real close to choosing Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah.
As more of a avatar for Kevin Feige, but I think, just choosing Kevin Feige outright, acknowledging him as the chief creative filmmaker behind these projects, the chief creative driving force.
Yeah.
I think it's only, right to give him his proper due.
It makes sense. I agree. I mean, I can see it. Honestly, I wish I would have picked that. I would have picked him. Because Kanye, I mean, like with Tom Brady, too, you could argue for both decades, but Kevin Feige is definitely a solid choice. I definitely agree with that. So, do you agree with us? That is my question, folks. Thank you for bearing with us, listening to this episode with us. If you're listening this far, thank you. Please let us know if you agree, disagree, what your thoughts are. At the Closers Podcast on Instagram, at Closers Podcast on Facebook. And we have a YouTube channel. If you're looking at my face right now, you're on it. So go ahead and subscribe and hit the bell down below. Helps us out quite a bit. You're going to be hearing this on Friday the 22nd of May. We're already halfway through the month. Can't believe it. Time is fucking flying. But we will be back with you on Monday. Very quick turnaround time with a very special guest. We're going to have a guest on. And who's it going to be? Stay tuned for that. On the Flippity Flip. Bye, guys. Thank you. Take care.